Good morning, everyone. I'd like to personally welcome you to another episode of our Fight Morning Quick Card Breakdown show brought to you by MMA Oddsbreaker as well as Bet DSI. This is Mike's MMA Picks here. We're back for UFC Vegas 50, where we have Mazo-Maverick taking on Thiago Santos in what may potentially be title implications on the line. 14 fights. 10 of these bouts are currently lined to finish. As I look up and down this card, I see the island of misfit fighters. Let's start with the first bout of the evening, where we have Tafon Nchukwi, whose Lloyd Irvin fighter has competed down at middleweight. We were able to see the warts in his game, the lack of well-roundedness. Coming in as a plus 150 underdog, taking on Azimat-Murzakanov. Murzakanov coming in as a minus 190 betting favorite. You watch Murzakonov's fight on the Contender Series, and he's fought similar to that over in Brave. Light on his feet. Southpaw, who has a decent gas tank, isn't necessarily shop-worn, still in his early 30s, taking on Nchukwi, who, despite being in his late 20s, we haven't seen any evolution in his game, and I don't think we're going to see that here. In the smaller octagon, Azimat's going to have to mind his P's and Q's and use his footwork here to dance around Nchukwi and land strikes en route to what likely will be a victory here. Murzakanov is the much more polished fighter at this stage in his career. So I'll be picking Azimat-Murzakanov in that bout. Gabe, good morning. Great to see you. Welcome. Are you ready? Next fight of the night, where we have the second bout on the card, which should potentially or could potentially have been played out in someone's backyard on the regional scene. It's incredible that this fight is taking place inside of the UFC's octagon. We've got an Argentinian fighter in Guido Cannetti, 42 years of age, taking on Chris Moutinho. Moutinho coming in as, this is even hard to fathom, coming in as a minus 150 favorite after taking the beating of a lifetime against Sean O'Malley. What we saw in that fight was somebody who was willing to take an exorbitant amount of damage and continue to march forward. Cannetti is someone who can put his game together for a few minutes at a clip, and then everything just falls off of a cliff. I do expect Cannetti to come out here looking sharp for the first 30 seconds of the fight. Moutinho to march forward as he usually does. That hair will probably be flying in all sorts of directions as he's getting caught on the feet, closing distance. And then I expect the tide to turn here and Chris Moutinho to turn up, so to speak, and take Guido Cannetti out of this fight, as has happened in previous bouts. So that is where I'm leaning in this fight. I don't recommend making a play on this bout unless you're looking at a violence bet where you could potentially have fight doesn't go the distance hovering around minus 115. So Tough fight to pick here. Moutinho has shown that he does not move his head, and he will march forward and take tremendous damage. So give me Moutinho in this spot, but this fight should be happening in someone's backyard and not in the UFC. Next up, where we have another misfit fighter, a couple of them, in Cody Brundage taking on Aldrich-Robertson. Lungiambula has fought at heavyweight, come down, and we saw him in there against Barriot last time out, running on fumes late in the fight. Cody Brundage had some success against Maximov, who's shown glaring holes in his striking game. I don't necessarily understand the hype of Nick Maximov. His control game is the best part of his arsenal here, and Cody Brundage is a wrestler who is going to look to stick to Lungiambula. Came in the last fighter to the scales, Cody Brundage, and Lungiambula can crack. We've seen that. He actually put one of the greatest light heavyweight fighters of all time in Mazo-Maverick. He caught him briefly and then suffered the consequences. Lungiambula, I expect him to come out here, guns blazing, trying to catch Cody Brundage, and I think that's what's going to happen here. You look at the fight doesn't go the distance line, sitting at minus 140. I'll be picking Lungiambula in this spot. Cody Brundage has a path to victory here in the wrestling department, but I'll be picking Lungiambula. I think that there'll be opportunities to land fight-ending strikes. As we've seen Cody Brundage, when he is fighting, he'll put himself in situations where he can be countered, and I think that's what's going to happen here. Let's see what else we have here. Oh, Cousin Gabe is saying that he's rolling with Guido. Best of luck to you, sir. Now, we've got a interesting matchup where we have multiple fighters coming off of losing streaks here. Sabina Mazo coming in with a plus 250 underdog price tag on her, taking on Miranda Maverick. Miranda Maverick has lost some of her shine, but she's also fought some legitimate competition in Erin Blanchfield. And she also, in my eyes, won her last bout, or her previous bout, against Macy Barber. So you got to wonder if there's a fire lit under her. And I believe there is here, taking on Sabina Mazo, who Alexis Davis, if you're losing to Alexis Davis at this stage in Alexis Davis's career, that is concerning here. And Sabina Mazo, inside of the smaller octagon, reminiscent of a giraffe, moving around the cage, prancing around, looking to use a significant reach advantage here. That is where Mazo should have her success, trying to keep this fight at range, because if she locks up in the clinch against Maverick, in my estimation, is the much stronger fighter in the clinch. And if this fight hits the mat, Maverick should be able to control Mazo. Jillian Robertson, we saw Maverick have her way in that spot, and Mazo is dangerous on the feet, but on the mat, I know we've seen some late submission prowess from Mazo, but I'm not feeling it here. I think Maverick is the worthy favorite, and I will be picking Miranda Maverick to win in that spot. Next up, where we have Cannetti-Moutinho taking on Damon the Leech Jackson. And you talk about somebody earning their moniker. Damon Jackson is one of those fighters, a fighter who will stick to his opponents, has shown a decent gas tank in spots. The Charles Rosa bout, when he got split open towards the end of that fight, he was still going strong, leaking like a sieve. And in this spot against Cannetti-Moutinho, I believe that is a path to victory for Damon Jackson. Now, Cannetti-Moutinho has survived some precarious situations against the likes of Makwan Amirkhani. Makwan Amirkhani, one of my all-time favorite fighters, who will put himself in danger and empty his tank early. You do not see fighters do that very often these days. By the way, Makwan Amirkhani will be fighting next week on the UFC London card. Cannetti-Moutinho, we've seen him in there with the likes of Billy Quarantillo and others. Cannetti-Moutinho is a fighter who, if you don't get him out of there, he could unload on you. And Damon Jackson's one of these fighters who doesn't make many mistakes. At least inside of the smaller octagon, I don't see him making catastrophic errors that could come back to rear its ugly head, as we've seen Damon Jackson brutally knocked out in the past. But I'm going to be leaning and picking Damon Jackson in the spot. I believe that he has the wits and the ability to win this fight. And at minus 120, I think that's a decent line that you're getting. Congrats to those who were able to lock in Damon Jackson at plus money. Next up, let's continue this journey, my friends, where we have Trevin Jones taking on Javid Basharat. Basharat, you talk about one of the worst beats one could have. I played, I believe, Javid Basharat under 2.5 in his Contender Series bout, where he admittedly was playing with his food and unable, or chose not to, finish his opponent. Took an L in that spot. Basharat taking on Trevin Jones here, who has a jiu-jitsu background, also is a very explosive fighter on the feet. And Basharat, when I look up and down his resume and I watch his fight footage, I'm concerned that he may not be as well-rounded of a fighter as one would like when considering roster construction here, especially in DraftKings. You're going to need to poke around and find underdogs that have the potential to score very highly. And Trevin Jones is one of those fighters. He's had his back up against the wall a few different times and was able to systematically implode his opponent. Mario Bautista, Timur Valiev, you can't count him out. And in this spot, Trevin Jones has a strength advantage, has a jiu-jitsu advantage. And if Basharat is able to maintain top position, that's where he should have some success. But I think that Trevin Jones is the much stronger fighter here. And on the mat, we should see some success out of Trevin Jones. I'm a little surprised to see him as an underdog, but this is one of those cases where you go back and you watch the Contender Series fights, and I think that that is baked into this line. So I'll be picking Trevin Jones as an underdog. Next up, J.J. Aldrich taking on Jillian Robertson. Jillian Robertson coming in as a minus 125 betting favorite, taking on a J.J. Aldrich who, you look at her amateur career, she fought the who's who. By the way, the one impressive victory I saw from Sabina Mazo was her win over J.J. Aldrich. I did not expect that there. Jillian Robertson in this spot, though, not a very well-rounded fighter. She's a specialist. She still 26 years of age, going to look to try to take this fight to the mat and lock up a submission here against J.J. Aldrich, who's coming in as a as a minus 105 fighter in this spot. Aldrich, more well-rounded in this particular spot. I believe Aldrich has a better gas tank, training at elevation, should have the much better stand-up here whenever these two are trading on the feet. And I think that this is a spot where JJ Aldrich, there is a little bit of value here on her. If Robertson is unable to lock up a submission, JJ Aldrich is a live fighter, and I'm going to be picking her to win in this spot. I think that she has some intangibles here and is the much more well-rounded fighter. We just have to look out for her takedown defense and her get-up game, because she will need it in this bout. Now, this is a interesting bout up next, where we have Matt Semelsberger taking on AJ Fletcher. Both of these fighters have a lot of steam behind them heading into this bout. Matt Semelsberger, the Chaos Williams fight, that was a fight that the victory was sitting there waiting to be taken. And Semelsberger, when he went for it, was able to have his moments. But he also, at times, you could see he was a bit reserved against Chaos Williams, who has fight-ending power. Now, on the other side of this fight, AJ Fletcher does have fight-ending power, built differently than most fighters. I've met Sean Shirk before, and he's the closest body type that I would compare AJ Fletcher to. It's amazing. It says he's listed at 5'10", but I've met Sean Shirk. Sean Shirk's about 5'3", and somehow, some way, everybody go back and watch the fight footage. Sean Shirk, with his very, very short reach, was able to outbox Nick Diaz and earn a victory. I would like everybody to go back and watch that bout. Incredible. And you talk about distance management and putting yourself in positions where you can land. AJ Fletcher is going to have to do that. He can't sit back at range against the much larger opponent in Matt Semelsberger, who is a very powerful striker and has a killer instinct. I like both of these fighters. It's a shame that they both have to face one another, because someone here is going to take an L, and probably a brutal loss that will not hit the scorecards. You look at the fight doesn't go the distance line, sitting at minus 240. I'm interested in AJ Fletcher here, but I have more faith in Semelsberger. Fletcher, I want to say he's a bit of an unknown, but seems like the real deal when you watch the fight footage. Everything he's done, he's maintained that throughout the entirety of his career, has been able to land takedowns seemingly at will. Is very explosive. The gas tank, I'm interested to see when he gets cracked on the button. Is he going to fold up similar to other fighters who Matt Semelsberger has landed on? I'm hesitantly picking Matt Semelsberger here because I believe the jury is still out on AJ Fletcher. I like what I've seen in AJ Fletcher. Very similar fighter to Sean Shirk in a lot of different ways. Can throw spinning attacks. That flying knee that he landed in the Contender Series bout, very impressive. You talk about the accuracy of strikes, and he's a very accurate, powerful striker, and has, despite, as I mentioned on the Contender Series, a lack of a credentialed wrestling pedigree, knows what he's doing out there. But give me Matt Semelsberger. I think that Semelsberger is going to test AJ Fletcher's chin, and that will take everything out of the equation. And I think that Semelsberger is going to finish Fletcher in this spot. You talk about fights that have the potential to finish. Let's talk about this next bout where we have Bruno Silva taking on Alex Pereira. Alex Pereira, This line has ballooned up a little bit to minus 195 on his side of the fight. You talk about a credentialed kickboxing pedigree. Taking on Bruno Silva as a plus 155 underdog who was awarded his black belt after being taken down numerous times and controlled on the mat against Andrew Sanchez. That was a really interesting situation that played out there. Bruno Silva, very explosive fighter. Saw him knock out Jordan Wright. We hit on a play. That fight doesn't go the distance in that bout, I believe. Pereira is very fun to watch, especially when he has space to work. Is Bruno Silva going to give him space to work? That is the question here. This fight isn't expected to go to a decision. I believe that line was hovering around minus 600. Unplayable in my eyes. Interesting bout where I believe whoever lands first is going to put their opponent in big trouble. Both of these fighters have dynamite in their fists and their feet. Pereira, the kickboxing background, I believe he's going to shine in this spot. And I'll be picking Pereira to win inside the distance. I'd be curious to see if Bruno Silva is going to try to implement some of his grappling, but I'm not going to trust it here. One of my mottos is you can't trust what you haven't seen. And this is a spot where Bruno Silva, look at all of those TKO victories up and down his record. Earlier in the week, I tweeted out a quote from Bruno Silva about he said something about being brave and going for it. And I think that he's going to get into a gunfight here and he's going to get knocked out. So give me Alex Pereira in this spot. And I expect both of these fighters to be very highly owned in DraftKings. One of them should be taking a knockout loss. Wow. Next up, we have a short notice replacement opponent, Terrence McKinney, coming in, riding the high of a win over Farisium, taking on Drew Dober. Drew Dober coming in as a minus 160 betting favorite. Drew Dober, who's a very stout individual. This fight takes place at lightweight, and you have Drew Dober, who California State Athletic Commission has been on his case in the past about his rehydration after weigh-ins. And this is somebody who I wouldn't doubt that he gets up to about 180 headed into the octagon tonight. By the way, these fights kick off at 4 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Terrence McKinney is going to have to come out here and try to grapple and put Drew Dober on his back. We've seen that can happen early and often, but can Terrence McKinney lock something up and take Drew Dober out of there? Drew Dober is somebody who's been in there against Islam Makhachev and others, Beneil Dariush, etc. And very stout individual. This fight gets extended. This is one of those spots where there's a glaring live betting opportunity on Drew Dober if this gets past the first round, because I expect Terrence McKinney to give it everything he's got to take Drew Dober out of there in this first round. He knows coming in on short notice, knowing that he's at a severe striking disadvantage, he's going to have to go for it here. So I like Drew Dober in this spot the longer the fight goes. There's, of course, if you want to look at Terrence McKinney round one, of course, that is a possible option for you. But I am going to pick Drew Dober here, and I'm going to pick him via live betting in the after the first round. That's I believe the play in this spot. And that is where I'm at here. Let's see. Daniel, good morning, sir. McKinney lands a takedown. Just say a matter of how much success he has. Yep, I believe he does. Yes. And I'll be picking Drew Dober in that spot. Grizzled veteran, 33 years of age, smaller octagon. He's going to have to work. Now, talk about Island of Misfit Fighters here, where we have Caceres-Yusuff taking on Khalil Rountree. Khalil Rountree coming off of the victory over Modestas Bukauskas, where he blew out Bukauskas' knee, and unfortunately, Bukauskas has been eliminated from the roster here at UFC. Taking on Caceres-Yusuff, who is a fighter who, in previous instances, has put himself in some horrific spots, getting caught on the ground against Brendan Allen. Also, Marvin Vittori. There have been other spots. The Kopylov fight, he was in some tough spots there. He's had some issues with weight cuts. By the way, Khalil Rountree is also somebody who, in his former life, I remember reading that suffered from morbid obesity and sought out fighting as a way to lose weight. And that seemed to have worked out for him. It's worked out for him fairly well here. Khalil Rountree, dog odds, smaller octagon, facing Roberson, who is the more well-rounded fighter, more athletic fighter, highly skilled fighter in my eyes. I think that Caceres-Yusuff is the side here, and I expect him to win. But as far as in-fight decision-making, you cannot trust Caceres-Yusuff. And I'll be picking Roberson to win. And this is one of those examples, my friends, where there are no certainties in this game. And this is a fight that I would try to avoid in most cases. But if you're nailing me down to pick one side of the fight, which is the reason we're here, Caceres-Yusuff will be the pick. I think Khalil Rountree has shown issues with his gas tank, and that should be a cause for concern in this spot. He's faded quickly. Let's continue to a fighter where, experience can mean a lot. And Alex Caceres is, I'll be honest, he's one of my favorite fighters on the roster. I've seen Alex Caceres is not somebody who goes out of his way to seek out the limelight. Has carved a incredible career, mixed martial arts career, dating back for quite some time. Still in his early 30s, riding a 5-fight UFC winning streak. Has been in there with Uriah Faber and others. Coming in as a plus 205 underdog, and he's facing a young gun in Caceres-Yusuff, who is coming off of a loss to Arnold Allen, where we saw there were levels to this game. And Caceres-Yusuff, I liked what he said in the pre-fight interview here leading up to this bout, where he was on autopilot, unable to change gears in the fight when he knew he was losing, but he was coasting, basically, and taking a loss. And that's what Arnold Allen can do to many fighters. By the way, Arnold Allen fights next week against Dan Hooker, who will be dropping down to featherweight. Caceres-Yusuff, very powerful striker, and I think that that's what's going to cause Alex Caceres some problems here. Caceres, last time out, locked up that submission victory and did not look for a way out of his fight, reminiscent of Aljamain Sterling. And I I am a bit torn in this spot because as we've watched Sadiq Yusuff in his previous matchups, he doesn't typically win fights unscathed. He has to overcome adversity in almost every fight. And if Caceres is able to survive, I would not put it past him to catch Sadiq Yusuff in a vulnerable position, either on the feet or somehow against the cage, transitioning to the back, where Caceres has had a lot of success. I'll be picking Sadiq Yusuff here. Alex Caceres is a tough fighter to get out of there. I think that that loss to Arnold Allen has lit a fire under Sadiq Yusuff. He's going to have to tighten up a few aspects of his game. I don't trust what I haven't seen, but what I have seen is Sadiq Yusuff being the much better striker and landing the much heavier power strikes in previous bouts. And I think that that's what's going to happen here against Caceres. It's just a matter of, can Yusuff stay on his bike for 3 rounds? Because Caceres is going to come after him and will not go quietly into the night unless he's knocked out, which I don't see that happening. But give me Sadiq Yusuff to win via decision. And I'll be pulling for Alex Caceres. I hope Alex Caceres wins this fight. One of the gifts to MMA. He's a great personality and a true martial artist at heart. So give me Sadiq Yusuff. Next up, where we have the Magic Man, Marlon Moraes, taking on Song Yadong, and a banger of a bantamweight fight. One of my favorite fights on the card, where you look up and down Marlon Moraes' resume. He's fought the who's who, has had success early in many of his bouts, and I expect him to come out here and try and find his way early after doing his camp at Tiger Muay Thai. Song Yadong has shown he has fight-ending power. He has a decent gas tank. And what I like about Song Yadong is every time he suffered a loss, he's improved coming into the next fight. The Cody Stamann fight, that was that was a draw, right? So that fight came back from that, added new wrinkles to his game. The Marlon Chito Vera fight, which is very close, we saw his cardio improve. The Kyler Phillips loss, that was something that I was impressed with the way he bounced back in that spot, and still in his early 20s, taking on a Marlon Moraes who was beaten to a pulp by Merab Dvalishvili and was also within a strike or two of winning. Marlon Moraes, the Rob Font loss, his head looked like it was part of a Pez dispenser, being beaten all over the octagon. The loss to Corey Sandhagen. There have been a number of challenges for Marlon Moraes, and I go back to the Henry Cejudo fight, where was having early success with leg kicks, and that's something that I expect him to try to use here against Song Yadong. Try to stay evasive. It's just a matter of how long can he do this, though. I think he's going to be having some success early in the first few minutes, but I expect the wheels to fall off dramatically for Marlon Moraes, as they have fallen off many times before. The longer this fight goes, I'll be picking Song Yadong here. Take a look at Song Yadong inside the distance. There is the potential for Marlon Moraes to try to do his best to fight a disciplined game plan, but I expect him to get caught at some point. I'll be picking Song Yadong in this matchup. And then where does Marlon Moraes go from here? This is a fighter who is now on the chopping block, one of the most highly skilled bantamweights in the division, but he's just missing a few aspects of his game, and one of them being a chin at this point in their career. I mean, look at the damage. Dvalishvili is not a striker and was able to pound his head into the canvas and give the damage that was sustained in that fight. I can't believe that Marlon Moraes is back in there so quickly. Let's move to the main event of the evening, my friends, where we have Thiago Santos taking on Magomed Ankalaev. Ankalaev has ballooned now all the way up to a minus 590 betting favorite. Originally, he was to be had at some major books in the minus 150s, I believe, minus 200, etc. And cheers to those who were able to get in on Magomed Ankalaev at a great line many moons ago, taking on Thiago Santos, who plus 390 betting underdog, 38 years of age, double knee replacement, right? Major surgeries. Hasn't looked the same since the John Jones fight where he blew out both of his knees, and very explosive fighter. Despite having his knees replaced, he's held back and he hasn't shown the same level of commitment to his strikes. He can fight in spurts, but that comes at a cost. This bout is scheduled for 5 rounds. We've seen folks get burned big time by fight doesn't go the distance props when Thiago Santos has fought in the past. He went the distance with Johnny Walker. That was a real eye-opener for many, and also Nikita Krylov. Now, Magomed Ankalaev, I've long considered him to be the best light heavyweight fighter on the planet. And you talk about fighters taking losses and then making them better. The loss to Paul Craig is one of those fights. I believe that has lit a fire under Magomed Ankalaev. It's a shame that part of his career was stunted with matchups against Ian Kudalaba, but Magomed Ankalaev still in his late 20s here. Someone who has a great gas tank, has very disciplined striking. I am very impressed with his head movement and his reaction timing, his speed, and now something that he's added to his game recently is the killer instinct. His ground game is a threat. There are many aspects of Magomed Ankalaev's game that I respect greatly. And Thiago Santos is one of those fighters where if he commits and if he catches you with a spinning attack or something that you don't see, he could shut anyone's lights off. Yes, Thiago Santos has a puncher's chance here, no doubt. Kicker's chance, no doubt. But I believe Magomed Ankalaev will walk out with a victory. And what was shocking to me was, I mean, you watch out for all of Santos's previous fights, and he's been able to go the distance in many spots, but fight doesn't go the distance. Is still hovering in the minus 160s, minus 170s. I don't see this one going the distance. I think that Ankalaev is going to pick Santos apart. And the longer this fight goes, I see it hitting the mat and Ankalaev landing some hellacious ground and pound. Also, wouldn't surprise me to see Ankalaev end up with a submission. But I'll be picking Ankalaev to win inside the distance. And I think we're in for a real seminal moment here as far as the light heavyweights go. John Jones has exited the division and doesn't look like he's competing anytime soon. And Ankalaev should be fighting for a title here soon. And I believe he beats John Jones as well. And I wish that fight would have been made about a year or two ago. So give me Magomed Ankalaev in this spot. Yes, Thiago Santos has the potential to win a fight via a fight-ending strike, but Ankalaev is something that's very special. Want to thank everybody for tuning in today. You can check out my plays at MMA Oddsbreaker Premium, third-party tracked at betmma.tips. We've been rolling here since mid-December. Everything third-party tracked dating back to 2017 at betmma.tips. Long-term tracked proven winner who is trying to help everybody take a measured, methodical approach to the MMA handicapping industry. Let's go and do this. Thank you, sir. Cheers, everybody. Remember, the fights start today at 4:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And go get what's yours, my friends. Let's do this, all right? Let's go.